Take one.
During this presentation, 7 people will be assaulted. And there are, I believe I counted 8 women in this class. That would be about 3 women assaulted out of the 8. Let me quickly count the Okay, so that's also, it would be also 1 in 4 guys that would be assaulted. Okay. Every 2 minutes, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are assaulted before the age of 18. Think about how many people are assaulted after the age of 18. And that's a pretty staggering, gosh, it's a crazy percentage, the way that it is. It's every 2 minutes. It's just like, I believe, every 10 seconds or every 30 seconds a baby is born, or something like that. And then every 2 minutes, somebody is sexually assaulted. 60% of rapes are unreported, and I will get into why later on. Each year in the United States, a total of 213,000 people will be assaulted in 1 year, and that's pretty intense. 2.78 million men have been victims of sexual assault. For those who think that men don't get assaulted, no, they can and they do. And it happens, it could happen every day. It doesn't matter, it happens. In the military, in the last 10 months, 19,000 women, soldiers, have been reported being sexually assaulted. And that's almost 2,000 a month. And nothing's being done about it right now, because it's just, they sweep it under the rug. That's just what they do. It's easy to do that. It's easy to just let it go and say, oh, okay, it's nothing. It's just there, it's whatever. It's not whatever, it's how it's just not supposed to be that way. There are effects to being sexually assaulted. Victims have a huge fear of the act repeating. They have a fear that that person might do it again to them, or that somebody else might do it to them, because they could see it on their face. They could see, in general, what the victims had been through, because the victim's looking over his or her shoulder all the time. Walking around, never walking around at night, always walking around during the daytime, and even then, having some sort of protection with them. They no longer feel safe in normally comfortable environments, where they felt safe in their own house before, or their shower, or their bedroom, or their workplace. They don't feel safe there anymore. And they decide to not be there anymore. They decide to move out of their house, quit work. And they don't want to give an explanation on why. Explanation. They have a resentment towards family and friends, unintentional resentment. They have anger towards everybody they care for. And unfortunately, they're unable to control their feelings, especially when they're triggered. And that's a very unfortunate thing, because there are people out there who just don't know what is going on with their kid, or what is going on with their best friend or their sister. And the victims just can't do it. They can't talk about it. They feel like they can't talk about it. But they can. It can be difficult, from what I've heard, but it can be done. Some people notice if something happened to another person. Like I said before, people notice when they're always looking behind their back when they're walking around, even at night, even if they're walking a block to their work or 2 blocks to their work, and they're constantly looking back. And some people, unfortunately, want to take advantage of stuff like that, too. That's very, very sad. In the workplace, how the victim does his or her job, it's affected because of sexual assault. And that person could lose focus, not do anything that they're supposed to be doing at work. Like they're supposed to be writing a paper for work, and they just don't do it because they feel that, oh, I'm just going to put it off because I'm having PTSD problems today, or I'm having this or I'm having that. That's how victims typically think. Victims could possibly get fired for unproductiveness at work because of not doing his or her job. And that too is very, very sad. And they can't explain to their boss why. Great. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, victims typically have that. Victims have PTSD when they're in war. And when they're assaulted, they have very similar PTSD as a sexual assault victim. It is one and the same when it comes to the effects. When you're in war, you see these terrible things. You've done these terrible things. As a sexual assault victim, the victim has the same feelings. They feel scared, or they wake up in the middle of the night because they just can't sleep. They have nightmares, they have night terrors, they see the person wherever they go. Their body uncontrollably shakes. It's a natural body's response when it comes to PTSD. And then natural body's response is you shake, you're alright. You just basically, you're shaking, you're crying, you're screaming, you don't know what to do with your emotions. That's how the victims typically are. Victims are looking over the shoulder a lot of the time, as I had stated before. They have a fear of others hurting him or her. And that's even loved ones. Like if you're a male and you were assaulted by a female, you may have a wife, and you may be afraid of that wife. Same thing goes the opposite way. If you have a husband and you're a female victim, you're afraid of that husband going near you because you're afraid that that person will hurt you, even though you know that person won't. You feel like that person would. During PTSD, the victim is no longer in reality. They typically see the person attacking them all over again. The same feelings, the same physical and emotional pain that they deal with is PTSD, and it's being no longer in reality. Their victims are 13 times more likely to abuse alcohol and 26 times more likely to abuse drugs. 36%, and that's 1/3 of all women in prison, were sexually abused as children and have never had counseling for it. That's why they are in prison. Victims are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression than anybody else, because that can be a very traumatizing thing to go through. It's just like if you're a child and you go into the street, you're like 4 years old, and you go into the street and your cat gets run over, and you see it happen. It's trauma, and it happens. Reporting the crime. Victims have fear of the perpetrator coming back to harm him or her, or kill him or her. And that can happen. It's not very likely. It could be likely, especially if you knew the person personally. But if you did not know the person, then chances are that you'd be safe for the most part. There would be personal protection order. Is that how you say it? Personal protection order that you can file against that person, and that could protect you. And if that person does kill you, that person's going to prison for a really long time for murder. Victims have a fear that no one will believe them. There are a lot of false accusations out there. And that's why people say, oh, we don't believe you, you're lying. That's what the defense attorney tends to say. They like to say things like that, like, oh, you're lying. You know, did you say no or did you not say no? And if you didn't say no, they'll use that against you. They have a fear of going to court and explaining what happens in detail. This is known as the second rape, because victims have to say in great detail exactly what happened to them. Victims don't recognize what happened as rape, especially when they're at such a young age. They don't recognize it. They can have a boyfriend, and their boyfriend could pressure them into sex, and they'd say no multiple times, but they wouldn't recognize that as rape. Half the time. It depends on the situation. They have a lack of faith in the criminal justice system, and I don't blame them. The criminal justice system can be corrupt, and there are a lot of people who go free. However, there is that 1%, that small percentage that people actually do go to prison and serve their time. They have a fear of others blaming him or her. Blame is a huge thing that people are feared. They are scared that everyone's going to be like, oh, it's your fault, because that was what was happening back then. Back then, oh, what were you wearing? Because you were wearing this, it's your fault. Because you were walking at night, it's your fault. Because you were at a party drinking, it's your fault. But that's not the case at all. 15 of 16 rapists will never spend a day in jail. And it upsets me, because I know a few people who have been assaulted, and they never spent a day in jail. Not one day, not even a second. They didn't go to jail, they didn't cheat. They've tried to take them to court. Nothing happened, because there was no great evidence that they needed. Because the defense attorney tends to look into your background when it comes to sex. And they'll be like, oh, well, you're the type of person to get freaky in bed, so you liked it and you weren't raped. Only 6% will serve any time at all. And hopefully by the end of, in general, maybe in 10, 15 years from now, maybe 20 years from now, 86% will serve time in prison. And there are groups out there who are talking about things like that and trying to get these things going. My friend in California, she actually is doing a play on sexual assault. And she's getting publicity from it in her town. And she's actually getting movie production people to come and talk to her. And what she's also going to do, she's going to talk to the military women too, and perform her play there as well, to show people that it is not acceptable. It's okay to tell somebody. And if somebody doesn't listen to you the first time, keep talking. Say it over and over again until you're heard. Do not give up. And that's the thing that she stresses the most. There are groups out there who are, and I will get into this, who are trying to process rape kits. You know, there are Natasha's Justice Project, or Joyful Heart Foundation. They're trying to process rape kits. It costs $1,000 for one rape kit to get tested. So they're trying to raise money to get people, to get all this money in, because nobody can afford it to be processed. In Detroit, they're actually